a much easier crowd to wrangle than yesterday. But they did really well yesterday. There were 260 of us here yesterday, diocesan employees, both the purely diocesan side and the school side. Everybody basically who Bishop signed a check for, we showed up and got to experience this wonderful day that you're going to experience today. And you're in for a treat, I don't mind saying. Just a little bit of housekeeping in terms of at your tables. Great job, seek and find. That was the first job. You know, I didn't have great charts or anything today for that because there were too many variables. But you all did a great job. So well done. Congratulations. Now the other piece of that is one of you at your table has two packages. Okay, so there was one that has significantly less writing on it than the other. And it includes questions. Congratulations, you are your table facilitator. Now, this is an important role, but it is not a high stakes role. You're not going to be asked to report out or talk or do different things like that. But you are going to be in charge of timekeeping for your table, and you are going to be in charge of writing things down. But Linda's going to explain a little bit more about when you do that and how you do it. And also, so that you're aware, we are streaming live through the diocesan live stream. But that's only going to be for the presentation portion of today, so that others who were not here are going to be able to hear it. The rest of the day will not be recorded because it's, you know, it's not that. I also just quickly, I have two hats. I'm wearing one, but I have two today. I also have the privilege of being the spiritual director for the Society of St. Vincent de Paul Particular Council. And I just want to know, how many of you here are from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul? Good on ya. So we put out a special invitation to all of you as part of our goal for faith development. And we said, why reinvent the wheel? Let's just connect with the one that we're already doing. And thank you for heeding that call. That's wonderful. If you want to come up and say hi to me, or you want to come chat or whatever on the breaks, I'm more than happy to meet you and to have a quick chat. So thank you for being here. All right, from now to Linda. It is my great privilege to introduce you to Linda. Linda Staudt was the former Director of Education for the London District Catholic School Board in Ontario. But more excitingly than that, she was basically like the boss of the superintendents. So I would have been one of her superintendents. That's how that rolls, right? That's how that rolls. And she was selected, though, she was only one of 7 lay people in North America who were selected by Pope Francis to be a voting member at the Synod, okay, in Rome. And so you're going to hear all about that today, and we are so blessed to have you here. Please, a warm round of applause and welcome for Linda Staudt.
My biggest challenge is going to be that I tend to wander, but if I wander, then the tape won't get me. So I'm going to try to stay put. But thank you, Paul, and thank you to Bishop Gary for the invite. As soon as Bishop Gary sent me the background in terms of what you had been doing, I said yes immediately. And I'm also eager to follow in terms of the work that is going on. You are at the leading edge. And I'm just so pleased to be here. I'm sharing quite a unique story. So it was in July of 2021 that I made the decision that I was going to retire. And 2 years earlier than I thought I would, and this basically was at the end of COVID. And I really thought the next person needs to stay longer than 2 years in terms of bringing the board to the next phase. So it's now August the 1st, and I'm thinking, now what? What do I do? So in a weak moment, I said to my bishop, if you need anything. He took me up on it immediately, and myself and Father Paul Belangeon from the diocese, we organized the listening sessions for at the beginning of the whole synod process. And much like here, I was involved in organizing within the London diocese. And then after that, I was asked if I would consider chairing the committee now that was synthesizing all of the reports from Ontario. So basically the reports went from the parish to the diocese to the province, so did that for Ontario. Then those reports went to a Canadian report, and then it went to an international report, and there were 7 of those. It was the largest listening session and consultation that had ever taken place worldwide. So it was now, we were convening for the synod of October of 2023. It was April, the end of April, that the Pope made the announcement, after listening, that we needed lay people there. And particularly, he wanted young people and women. Unfortunately, I only made one of the categories. So Bishop Fabreau said, "Can I put your name forward?" And I thought I'd be honored, and never thought it would go further than that. And I went on with my life. It is now the end of June, and I'm living in Windsor, Ontario. I worked in London, and it gets pretty hot. I just came in from cutting the grass. I'm all sweaty, and I see a phone message, Canadian Catholic bishops, and I'm going, couldn't possibly be. Anyways, it was. Couldn't believe it. So, of course, the question was, are you prepared to spend a month in Rome? Well, that was an easy one. Yes. But literally, what was unique about this is the amount of planning that had gone on already, and the Pope to make the announcement that late meant this was not easy. But he listened, and as a result, there was now 70 lay people from across the globe. So there was going to be 10 from each of the continents. So for us, it was the United States and Canada. So when I first heard that, well, 10, it wasn't going to go 50-50 with Canada and the US, so maybe 60-40, but more likely we thought it was going to go 70-30. It actually went 60-40. So there's 4 of us, you'll see pictures of us that got selected. And as an educator, I spent 36 years in Catholic education as a teacher right through the head of the school board. And I've had amazing experiences, but nothing really in comparison to this. So what I want to share with you is the journey and the conversations in the Spirit to give you a sense of that synodal culture that we experienced, and the methodology which you will have an opportunity this afternoon and this morning to experience, much like we did when we first arrived in Rome, and then share with you some of the highlights of the final document. So I'm going back now 2 years to October of 2023. So that was the other piece of information that, as I'm on the phone, not only was I going to Rome for 1 year, for 4 weeks, I was going back for another 4 weeks in a year's time. So I'll share both of those experiences. So I had just arrived in Rome. It was a Friday, and then on the Saturday evening, there was an ecumenical vigil led by Pope Francis. And what was really striking about this, besides having a vigil led by the Pope, is much like what you did today and what Bishop Gary did, is at the beginning of the homily, the Pope left 8 minutes of silence. And we all know, like from Remembrance Day, sometimes people get antsy after 2 minutes. So 8 minutes of silence was significant, and it should have been a clue in terms of about, what was to happen. But really it is something that we're no longer accustomed to, and something that we truly do have to go back to. And in his homily, Totus, 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 this came from, he had just previously celebrated World Youth Day in Portugal. It's all, all. And there is space for everyone, and when there isn't, please, let us work so that there is. So we no longer we just arrived in Rome. It's Saturday evening. The ecumenical vigil finishes. We have a stand-up dinner, and we're all headed to buses now outside of Rome for 3 days of retreat. It was a wonderful retreat center in Sacrofano. And without prayer, there will be no synod. And prayer didn't mark like the bookends in terms of at the beginning and the end. This was seamless. It literally was a month-long pilgrimage. We had two outstanding facilitators, Reverend Mother Maria Grazia Angelini and Father Timothy Ratcliffe. If you were to Google Father Timothy Ratcliffe, I'll share some of the highlights of what he shared, but you can actually see the actual meditation and reflection that he provided to us in Sacrofano. So we had 3 days of retreat, and what was different now for everybody, so up until now, these synods were only attended by bishops and cardinals. So as lay people, you have 70 of us now who are new. It needed some time in terms of us getting to know each other, and the retreat did exactly that and really set the stage so beautifully for us. So the meditation by Father Timothy and Mother Angelini was about 30 minutes, which was followed by 1 hour of silence. And we were asked to reflect on the reflection that he had just provided, because later in the day, we were doing exactly what you're going to be doing, and we were experiencing the conversation together for the first time. So we too were learning the process every day in terms of what it is like. This was then followed by another meditation and another hour of silence. Now we could go outside, we didn't have to remain in the chapel. And I was then introduced to Roman siesta, which meant that we stopped at noon and we resumed again at 4 o'clock. And that was throughout the entire time there. And then we picked up again from 4 until 8 o'clock. I got accustomed to eating dinner at 8 o'clock at night, which was not something that I was accustomed to before. And then when we came back, again, we tried out with groups in terms of the conversation in the Spirit. And you have to experience it, and that's why we're just so pleased that you're here today to have that firsthand experience. Was then followed by Mass and dinner. So just a few of the key messages that I want to share. Hoping against hope. This had to have been the Secretariat's prayer throughout this, because this had not been done before, and you're hoping against hope that this synod will lead to renewal, and that whatever small deeds we do will bear fruit beyond our imagination. Friendship, that this synod will lead into friendship with the Lord and with each other. And the line that I've used so often is effective collegiality precedes effective collegiality. We needed to become friends first before we really knew how to work together. The conversation on the way to Emmaus, really here, it's, if we really listen, our ready-made answers will evaporate. So it's not coming in thinking you have all the answers, but it's listening to what others are sharing, and you'll have that experience as well. The authority one is one that he had to address. So now that there is lay people, does that mean that the bishops have less authority? No, of course not. But what it does, and he gave the examples of the 4 gospel writers, because we had 4 gospel writers, and 4 accounts, we sort of have a complete 360 of those events that took place. And much the same with us being there now, you get a more complete picture. So it was a gift for us to be there. So we all have authority, but we have so differently. And the spirit of truth. Now this one I thought he was talking to me just personally as a former director of education, that letting ourselves be guided by the Holy Spirit and renouncing every attempt to plan and control everything to the last detail. And really allowing that silence and that time for reflection for the Holy Spirit to enlighten, to guide, and to direct us. So it is now the Tuesday night. We have finished the retreat. We're back on buses, and we're back to Rome. And this was the scene at our return. And this again now was 2 years ago in St. Peter's Square. At the beginning of each module, the masses took place at the altar of the chair in the basilica. You really don't want to close your eyes because you're afraid if you open them, you're dreaming that you really aren't here. But I have a picture of proof that I was there. Notice that the bishops are attired in their formal attire. And watch later, when we're in the Synod Hall, they're not. And that was done on purpose, one, to make us feel more comfortable, but we really were together on this, and the hospitality and the generosity shown was wonderful. So this is our entrance into the hall, the Paul VI hall. They look like friendly gentlemen, but without your name tag, you were not getting past. And each was, so you see about 3 different layers. They look like they're just standing around, but they're making sure that we each have the respective name tags. This is Paul VI, the audience hall. So this is the big change. Not just for us now, but for the bishops. So prior, the synods that were held were basically in theater style. And the bishop one of the bishops said to me, Linda, we would have gotten to know the person on our left and then the person on our right, but you really weren't able to talk to very many others. Versus our whole time, and for both years, we were around round tables. And if there is a symbol of synodality, it is the round table. There's no head at a round table. And when the Pope was with us, as you'll see, he was also at a round table. So the technology made it possible. So on my badge would have been 27-11. So that means I had to find table 27 and C11. And when I got there, there was an iPad with my name on it. At the back of my badge was a QR code. The camera on the iPad would scan the QR code, and my name would come up, just like you see on the left, and all the documents that I needed was now available to me. So you see that there's screens in the middle of our tables. So when we were working, we could plug in one of our laptops, and everybody around the table could see what we were working on. And when it was being broadcast to the entire hall, you were not only on every screen at the table, you were also way at the back you see the big screens in the hall. And you'll see that again later as well. And then in the middle, that white device is the camera. So when you were speaking, and one time that I was asked to be the relator, you're the one who is now presenting your group report to the entire hall. Then all of a sudden you see on your iPad the listing of who's next. So your name is going up, it's going up. And when it's now your turn, the mic goes red, the camera turns on you, and you are on every single screen in the entire hall. Fortunately, I've experienced public speaking. The headsets, we could tune in to the our language. So the languages was English, obviously Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. For those that were there, and I had a bishop next to me for one of the sessions that was from Germany, and English was his second language. It was a little bit more challenging for them, obviously, because it was their second language, but they did wonderfully. So I did have the advantage of speaking in the first language, and if I didn't mention, French was also the language. So we were in 34 small table working groups. So again, what I was just sharing before the process, so the 7 continental reports got synthesized into one report, which was called Enlarge the Space of Your Tent. If you go and Google it, you can still find these documents are still posted. And now this put together what literally the church heard worldwide from the parishes, from the people. So from that, this was the other brilliant part of it, they put together an instrumentum laboris, and this was sort of the working document that we would be working from, and it had the questions that we as a synod, 350 of us, were going to be addressing. So these weren't questions that were made up by a group in Rome. These were questions that emerged literally from the Church Universal. You think that when you're going from parish to diocese to province to continent, it would be sort of like a game of telephone, that, by the time the message goes up, it's going to get sort of garbled. It was the exact opposite. The message got amplified. The same messages were coming up continent after continent, and you see that in that report. And how did we work? The conversation of the Spirit. And I'll share in the next slides, and this is what we're going to be asking you to do this afternoon. So again, we're now here for an entire month of October. So it was the vigil, the 3-day retreat, the opening mass, and then we were together at our tables for each of those modules. So we had the first module there in red, and then 3 modules, communion, mission, and participation. And that the last part now was a concluding document. While we were working, we had teams of theologians and writers in the background that were synthesizing everything that was emerging from our working tables. And then the concluding mass with the Pope. This year I arrived in Rome on September the 28th. And I left Rome on October 28th. So the first round, and this is again what we're going to be asking you to do. Now the questions that we're giving you are a lot easier than the ones we had, so it's pretty relaxed. But we had homework. So what we had to do is we had the questions from our experience that you're responding to the question, so you've taken time now to prepare, and then what happens is, I'm not going to move, but somebody would then at the table begin. And because we were somewhat limited by time, we're trying not to limit you by time today, you had 4 minutes. So it's your response to that question. You have 4 minutes. Everybody is listening. Then you went clockwise to the next person. So there's no rebuttals, there's no comments. Everybody is listening. And this is the hardest part that people have, and we did too, because you're used to somebody saying something and then you want to make a comment immediately. It's not allowed. You have to hold it. You have to listen. So then the next person, and we went around the table. When we got to about the 6th person, there was 12 of us, then we allowed about 3-4 minutes of silence. And it was just now reflecting on not what you had said, but what have you heard now from the others at your table that is resonating. We then completed, and that was the end of the first round. And again, the silence that marked our retreat, The silence that marked the ecumenical vigil was key here, and we had another 4 minutes of silence to reflect upon what it was that everyone said. We then went into round 2. This is when the neat things start to happen. So you are now asked, after round 1, what really resonated with you? What made your heart burn in terms of what you heard that was shared? And we're going to be asking the very same thing of you in terms of, after that first round of sharing, what really resonated in terms of what you heard? You start seeing the convergences that are taking place. And again, that how important it was, those moments of silence, just to reflect upon. And I look back at my previous role, and I was saying to Paul, I would do things differently now even, because frequently when I was meeting with the superintendents, let's say there was a question that we were working on, what frequently would happen, someone would say something, and then immediately the first person who responded would say something next, and then it would go back sort of like a game of ping pong. And you stopped listening because you now were trying to figure out what's your response going to be. And what was important is that I needed to hear from all of the superintendents, not the first person, not the loudest person. And you know, sometimes when that process goes on, is that if you have someone that's particular, let's say louder, what happens to the introvert? They're just backing off and they're not going to say anything, and they probably have something really key to say, but they're not going to say it. And what this process really allows is everybody is equal. Everybody has the equal amount of time. It's not the loudest person. So another way of saying it is the extrovert is required to listen and the introvert is required to speak. And it really makes sure that all voices are heard. The building together, we won't have time to do. So when we were working, the 34 groups, so we had heard now what our group had decided, and we had to submit a final report. So there was 34 tables now submitting a final report. But it was really important for us also to hear what the other 33 groups had said. So every round, we would, every module, we voted on who would be the rapporteur. So one of the times I was selected as rapporteur, and then when my time came, then what I was saying, you know, the mic goes red, all the cameras are on me. To ensure that no one went over 4 minutes, they gave you the signal. But you can imagine if 34 groups each went over even by a minute, we weren't going home for dinner. So at 4-minute mark, the mic would go lower and lower and lower and then cut off. And I must admit, when it happened to the Cardinals, the other Cardinals got the biggest chuckle. But it didn't matter who you were, whether you were a layperson, a bishop, or a cardinal, that mic was going dead on you. The Pope would have been an exception, but that was about it. So during that time, it is hard work of listening, and you're looking up, and all these tables now are reporting out, and you look up and you see the Pope, and he's taking notes. It was impressive. He was listening. So again, the importance of the silence and the reflection, and we truly did become friends. I'm going to move, only because I don't have the list memorized. So if you notice at that table, this is my first table. I just arrived in Rome. We just come back from the retreat after the opening mass, and you're dying to find out who's at your table. You're noticing I'm the only woman. I'm the only layperson, and your first thought is, okay, Linda, you're finally over your head here. And that wasn't the case at all. I could not have been made to feel more welcome. And the first thing that they did in terms of making me feel welcome is we went around and asked how we wanted to be called. Every single bishop and cardinal said by their first name. I don't call my bishop by his first name, but that's how they wanted to be addressed. And it really showed in terms of synodality and being on equal footing and how valued. So around the table was France, Malaysia, Sydney, Australia, Texas, Cameroon, Liverpool, Ethiopia, Singapore, Trinidad, Tobago, Bombay, and Canada. And that's how diverse all of the groups were that I was part of. And what a gift that was to hear the stories. I knew what my response is to the question, the experience that I had, but to hear it now from literally people around the world. We became friends. And it really, truly was wonderful. So we now to the final week. And we had teams now that I said of theologians and writers who were putting this all together into a draft report. And again, this was a true sign of synodality. That report that they put together could have been the final report. But they said, no, this is the draft report. You've all heard everybody else's response. So one day was set aside where the only thing that we did is provided input in terms of were there any recommendations that we wanted things to be changed. So you got 34 groups working an entire day. There was like 1,232 submissions that were now submitted. And you're thinking, when you first hear that, like, did these guys not agree on anything? And that wasn't it at all. It really did make the document better in terms of the input that was received. So we had to, so then we're coming back now. This is the Saturday evening. We're ending the synod. The next day is the closing mass, and we're all heading back to Rome. This is the final document, and again, you can find it on, just Google it, you can find it. There are 20 chapters. Each chapter has about 10 paragraphs. We voted by paragraph. I voted 200 times. If a paragraph did not get 2/3 majority, it was voted off the island and would not appear. And this is where, hoping against hope, that the Synod Committee, because it would have been noticeable by its absence if certain topics just did not appear now in the final document. The least was 80%. And it was only because of this methodology that we would had, to such a degree, the convergence in terms of the voting.
Where can you find this?
If you were to, the best site is just go Synod, even if you just go final report, it'll take you to the, it'll take you to the spot. It's easier than trying to tell you. Google is wonderful. So the main themes that emerged: the conversation as the Spirit as a tool, the welcoming, the listening, the including, the pastoral accompanying, the expanded role of women in ministry and in leadership, the expanded lay involvement of co-responsibility. One of the things that we heard, I know, in London, when the submissions were going in, the church needs to. And it wasn't like we need to. Like, people still didn't feel that they were the church. And with what we're doing with synodality, this will change. That ongoing formation and mission in the digital environment, and I think we all learned a lot through COVID, and how important it is to reach more people in terms of using the technology that we have available. So it's November of 2023. We're all going home. In July of 2024, there had been some consultations, and each country was asked to submit, in terms of what was in the final document, some best practices, and in terms of what they had now heard as this final report was shared. That got submitted. And then the second instrumental laboris that we were working with was released. And again, if you just type instrumental laboris for the second session of the Synod, you will see this document, and it is very public. So we're now back in Rome for our second round. And first thing that we did, this time they did not send us away. We didn't, last time we were there almost 5 weeks. So the retreat we had was in the Synod Hall, which previous was where they would have met. And I didn't capture that picture, but it was like friends who hadn't seen each other now for a year, and they had a heck of a time getting us back into the room. Far longer than they had anticipated, but we just saw the next person we hadn't seen now for a year. So again, we had our same retreat masters, Father Timothy Ratcliffe and Mother Angelini, and one of the things what I have to share is, while I have this slide up, one of the things that happened while we were in Rome on this particular Sunday, and I think it was the third Sunday that we were there, as part of the Angelus, the Pope announces who the next cardinals are. They had no idea ahead of time that they were being named. So we just learned that Sunday, like the rest of the world, that Father Timothy Ratcliffe was named a cardinal. And I believe it's next week that they're being installed as cardinals. I'll show you a picture shortly. The Bishop of Tokyo, we sort of became friends over breakfast. And he was telling us the story the following Monday. We're eating breakfast. He was walking through Rome, and all of a sudden his phone goes off, and it's somebody from back home and says, "Congratulations, this is so wonderful for us." And he's going like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You're a cardinal." I am what? They did not know. I think the next morning he was still a bit of shell shock in terms of what this means, but and how humble he was. But literally, when we saw Father Ratcliffe and we had heard this, we're thinking, boy, you did a great job of hiding this. You led this retreat with us, and we would have had no clue that you're about to be named the cardinal. Well, he didn't either. So I put this up, and we revisited his words. It was prophetic in terms of what he had shared with us, and it truly had emerged. Hoping against hope that whatever small deeds we did would bear fruit. We were already seeing those fruits 1 year later. That the Synod will lead to a renewal. We were starting to see that already. We were drawing closer as brothers and sisters. The other thing that I want to note is that when you're listening, it means that sometimes you have to change course, even when it is not convenient. And we have a Pope who really was listening. So again, he made the announcement pretty late in the game that there was going to be now lay people. He also made the decision pretty far in that the Synod wasn't going to just last 1 year, but it was going to last 2 years, and that we would be coming back over the course of 2 years. In his wisdom, he knew that what we needed to accomplish was not able to be done in 1 year, and he wasn't afraid to make the changes. And then we, back in the diocese, we had to change our logos, because we still had the old logo in terms of that was 21 to 23, and now we're going another year, and we all had a chance to go back. Friendship, yes indeed, we became friends. and our ready-made answers did evaporate after we truly listened to each other. And it was even more powerful and more profound this past October. Like, I literally have just come back. This is my first travel since I came back from Rome. I came back at the end of October, and I've done already some presentations locally, and I just got over jet lag. So to avoid it this time, I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock and waking up at 4. I'm back in Ontario so this, on Monday night, so I'm not even bothering, because the other thing that made the jet lag and the time change more interesting is before we left Rome went back to standard time while we were there. So then a few days later, okay, we did that adjustment. A few days later, I'm now doing a 10-hour flight back to Detroit to Windsor. And then so I get back, so on the Wednesday I'm waking up at 2:30, then it's 3:30, then it's 4:30. I finally get to 6:30, and then what do? We change our clocks. I'm back now to 5:30. So I'm not even bothering this round to change, but letting ourselves again be guided by the Holy Spirit. And this was one of the retreat meditations that Father Timothy gave. And this is the type of listening that was asked of us and is being asked by everybody. And he gave this example of the poet Amos Oz, that he said of his grandfather, he listened. He did not just politely pretend to listen while impatiently waiting for her to finish what she was saying and shut up. He did not break into his partner's sentence and finish it. He did not cut in to sum it up, what she was saying, so as to move to another subject. He did not pretend to be interested or entertained. He really was listening. And listening, we're being asked to listening to God and to our brothers and sisters is the discipline of holiness. And what greater gift can we give each other than when we truly listen to each other? And this is the gift of the conversation in the Spirit. And then Mother Angelini spoke to use silence as praise from the Psalm, and really the importance of silence. If you love the truth, be a lover of silence. And God grant to you to experience that which is generated by silence. How perfectly said. And again, to use silence as praise, and just allowing ourselves to be seized, by that wonder and stillness. So I arrived here on, what night was it? It was Tuesday. It was Tuesday night. Actually, it was Wednesday night. I flew on Tuesday, and the next day I had an opportunity just to do a hike. And for me, that silence and just it was the perfect thing that I could do in terms of preparing to be with you today. And if that sun continues, I plan to do one more tomorrow before I return. So this is the opening Mass. And who yes.
I was about row 4 back.
So we were both there together. This is the other view that we had. And again, on this day, we brought our umbrellas, because this is how it started out with the clouds. When Pope Francis came out, literally, this is what the skies were. We should have known. We shouldn't have had to worry. So this was my daily walk to work for the entire month of October. And again, the hall entering and the tables that we were at. So this time, it was a little bit different. It wasn't the Instrumentum Laboris wasn't questions, but really now summarizing, and I'll show it in a minute, in terms of these various themes that emerged from what had been shared. So we were working in these modules on all of these themes: the foundation, relations, pathways, places, and then we would go through the same process now in terms of landing at the final document. And each of these we did at our tables this very same process in terms of conversation of the Spirit. And again, opening each Mass, opening each module was a Mass at the Basilica. We had the introductory reflections. The Pope was with us whenever he could. The language tables, there was 16 in English, 7 in Italian, 6 in French, 6 in Spanish, and 4 in Portuguese. This was the foundation document. So this time, so you can see the headings, and again, if you were to look it up, you can find it. But it was a little bit different this time in terms of the process that we did, and it was an interesting way in terms of now, here's what we heard. So what we were asked now for each of those chapters was the first round. Could you highlight those points in the Instrumentum Laboris that you believe are particularly valuable and worthy of acceptance? So, and again, we went around and you identified, you knew what you identified, you were always very interested. Were other people picking up, and was it the same for all the different countries? So that in itself was a very neat exercise. The second round now asked us to identify any points that we thought needed to be discussed, deepened, or corrected, and we identified those. And the third round, we were now to identify the main issues that we wanted the whole room to discuss and why we thought it was important, so we had to also provide reasons. So then someone from our language groups, then they participated and they presented the themes that emerged from the tables. And then when they had done their work, we would have had a listing, in most cases, maybe about 7. Okay, so these were the main themes that all of our 34 tables came up with. And then the next part, again, was really interesting and important, especially for the people who were writing in the background. We each voted. We had our iPad in front of us to give a 1 and a 2. What's that first theme that you deemed most important, and the second? So now it gave a sense of what the priorities really were amongst the themes. We then had an opportunity as a whole room that you could speak to those themes as they came up, and they came up in the order of priority. And again, it was really interesting to hear the different perspectives around the room. And again, just the free interventions, again, the 3-minute timed interventions, and again, it had to be because of the work that we were doing. So we were asked, each table then, much like before, sent our 2 pages. We had to vote on it, that this was our report. We agree as a table. We had sent that off. The interventions that were shared with the large group, the team heard it, and then from there, they're now working in the background to put together the final report. All I knew is I did not want to be one of those people, because this was a lot of work. The interesting part is that there would have been nights, I'm sure, that they worked. They must have slept during the day, because once it came in, the amount of work that they had to do overnight to get ready. So just again, the diversity. This was one of the table groupings, table 29. You might recognize Cardinal Cherney. He's in Rome, and he's one of our Canadian cardinals. And then table 27. Again, you just see the diversity, and we became friends. And it was just a wonderful gift to be with them. So we all knew the importance of this final document. So we now had the final week, and once again, Father Timothy led us in a retreat to the final phase. So this was now our last week in Rome, and this is what it looked like. So we had the retreat on the Monday. The next day, we received, well, I should say later that day, we received the first draft of what it is that the writers had put together. And again, in that synodal style, once again, really faithful to getting the input. So we spent now, on that Wednesday, all 34 tables provided input to what it is that we saw necessary in terms of edits. Again, well over 1,200 some. You almost didn't, you did, but the changes were significant. And it just showed when we truly listened to each other and when everybody had an opportunity for input, we all agreed that when the final document came back, this is good. It was even better than the document that we had first seen, and it was only made possible because of our work at our table groups and making those suggestions, and it really was, it was phenomenal. We had 2 days of vacation. The only reason is they needed to write the final report. They would have had us working on something, I'm sure. We literally, for the time that we were there, like we worked from 8:30 to noon, and then we had from noon until 4 o'clock, and then we came back from 4 until 8, and we worked 5.5 days a week. So we had basically Saturday afternoon off, and then frequently Sunday, there was other things that were planned. So there wasn't a lot of just free time. So the amendments were made, the final document was put together, the voting took place, and again, we were on our iPads. And again, if it did not receive 2/3 majority, and again, it was well into the 80%, and most of them were into the 90% of the final document, and that was accepted. So the votes came in, everything stayed, and then something happened that we were not expecting. So the normal state that happens at these synods, as all of the bishops and cardinals were sharing with us, is that this then is given to the Pope. He then would put out a document of his own in terms of what was shared. Within 5-10 minutes, he basically said he's not doing that. This document stands as his. He made our document his document. We were almost in well, I think some were in tears. Like, this had just never been done before. And even the cardinals were taken a bit back, and the bishops who had been part of this process before, that what a sign of synodality. Like, talk about the people have spoken, and this is now, your document is my document, and it stands. So I just want to, and you have in your package, I just want to very briefly go through just some of the highlights. I have a binder that is the final report. It's 52 pages, 152 paragraphs. I thought better than to share the 152 paragraphs with you today, but let me share a few. So in the introduction, we had basically said we're presenting to the Holy Father and to all of the churches the witness to all that we have experienced and the fruit of our discernment for a renewed missionary impulse. We were able to witness, us as the members of the, as voting delegates of the Synod, witness to the first fruits that began in 2021. And the simplest and the most precious fruits mature in the life of family, parishes, movements, small Christian communities, schools, and movements. This is where the practice of community in the Spirit, community discernment, sharing of gifts, and co-responsibility is growing. It is here among yourselves. We knew what we had to do is we had to, synodality was a term that we weren't comfortable with, and we needed to do a better job in this final document of explaining it, and we're hoping that we did. So synod is basically walking together to dialogue, to discern, to decide. And synodality is walking together, orientated towards mission for that mutual listening, that dialogue, that community discernment. Number 29, if you wanted concrete, on-the-ground experience of what this looks like, we have the example. We see the features of a synodal, missionary, and merciful church shining in full light in the Virgin Mary, Mother of Christ, of the church and of humanity. She is the form of the church who listens, who prays, who meditates, dialogues, accompanies, discerns, decides, and acts. From her, we learn the art of listening, the attentiveness to God's will, obedience to God's word, and a readiness to hear the needs of the poor and to set out along the path. That synodality that we're talking about, that spirituality, it flows from the Holy Spirit. And it requires what we're asking you to do and what we were so involved in, listening to the Word of God, that contemplation, that silence, that conversion of heart. And it welcomes the variety of gifts that are distributed to all of us. And then 45 really is conversation. It's a tool. It's that tool that enables that authentic listening to discern what the Spirit is saying us. And if anything, that's my main message from leaving this experience is it's the methodology. It's that listening. What we came up with, the final document, is excellent. But what's going to live on is, can we develop this culture of synodality right from the ground level to the Church Universal? And that's our hope. On the boat together, again, as Bishop Gary was talking today in the homily, like taking a look at what we just heard, like today, and what we hear in the Gospels, really now that we learn little by little to make Jesus' practice our own, and really taking the time for silence and to meditate and reflect on what it is the Gospel is saying to us. And the synodal process has renewed the awareness that listening is an essential component. So much so that recommended is that there be a proposal to establish a ministry of listening and accompaniment. There is a study group right now that's going to report back within a year on this very thing. It's that important. And the other thing that we put in the document was, and I didn't know this until last year, that in canon law, what is required, the only thing that is required in terms of the parishes is that you have a finance council. It's not required that you have a parish pastoral council. So one of the recommendations, which will now happen, is that not only will parishes be required to have a finance council, but also a parish council. And it really does get to that listening, it gets to that co-responsibility. And that also, that how these bodies work, that they adopt the synodal way. I'm speaking in about a week and a half to trustees in Ontario of the Catholic school boards. And one of the things that I'm saying, not necessarily at your board meeting, but at your committee meetings, can this be a way of now really listening in terms of this conversation if you really want to make sure that everybody's heard? And when you're going out and doing your multi-year strategic planning and you're inviting consultation, what a beautiful way to ensure that everyone is heard. And I just want to share one example, and this one stopped me in my tracks. So when we were doing the listening sessions in London, we did it with the parishes, but we also brought focus groups together. And one of the focus groups was from the St. Vincent de Paul. So we asked for those who are receiving the services of St. Vincent de Paul if you would engage with us, and we wanted to listen to what their experience had been. So one of the things they said is that, what's going well and where's the struggles? They said, we very much appreciate receiving the money. We very much appreciate receiving the food. However, what we don't receive from you is friendship. You could have stopped us in our tracks. And how else but asking them and listening to their response would we have ever heard that? We wouldn't. We only heard it because we invited them and then we listened to what they had shared. And that has stuck with me. And if I needed any evidence of the power of this, that certainly was it. So I just want to share with you briefly, we'll still be done in time. We were also part of some mighty impressive events. So one of the things that you may have heard while we were over there, that was the night before the synod began, was a penitential service with Pope Francis. Again, powerful. The Sunday following, there was a rosary prayer service at Maria Maggiore, one of the Basilica churches in Rome, and again with the Pope, and again so very moving. This one was kind of neat. We were there when one of the Canadian saints was canonized, and we're all feeling very proud of ourselves that we're from Canada. There was a delegation that was there that we met later in the day, but how special it was for us to be there when Saint Marie Leone Paradis, the foundress of the Little Sisters of the Holy Family, was made a saint. And so on that day, Canada has one more saint. This was kind of neat. So this was a big deal. So Joyce Napier, who was next to Archbishop Miller, is the Canadian ambassador to the Holy See. And we were invited to her residence. And see that impressive, yeah, it was pretty impressive. So we got to be there with some of the other members of Canada who came over for the canonization. So again, it was very, very special. The women, we didn't think this was going to happen, but you know when you ask, and who knows what happens when you ask. So we asked on behalf of the women of the synod, could we just have an audience with the Pope? And what we really wanted to say was, thank you. And, you know, we're so grateful in terms of, he really has shone a focus in terms of women in leadership. Well, he said yes. So this particular Saturday, I think it was now, I think the last Saturday that we was there, that we met him, this is where he comes to life in these audiences. And people don't always see, because they're private audiences, but the smiling, this was an unbelievable moment. And of course, we have the picture. I'm in the, you can see second row on the left. And while we were waiting for the Pope to come in, I mean, you're just in awe. You're looking around this room, and it is so very stunning. And now, of course, with every audience that you see, I recognize that room. I was in that room. Which was kind of neat. And again, we became friends. One of the priests is from Malaysia, and that's Cardinal Tobin from the United States, and he has a connection to my area in Windsor. He has relatives there. So I was really glad to be at the table with him, but we truly did become friends. I do have to tell you the story of Wyatt. So Wyatt was the youngest. And just because he was the youngest, he got a lot of attention. So he's a University of Wyoming student. And so before he left, he wasn't sure whether this was going to work. Anyways, he typed up a letter. And prior to our sessions, that the Pope, he made himself available, and he was at the front of the room, and we could go and introduce ourselves. So the opportunity came. So he took it, and he's there with the Pope, and he hands the Pope this letter. And the Pope says, "Dear professors, please excuse Wyatt for the month of October from classes." Signed, Francis. he gave it to his profs when he came back. But he was just delightful. He's a music education student, and I said, Wyatt, I would hire you now. But anyway, he's going to do wonderful things. I do also have to mention Sister Chantal, who is next to me. She also got quite a bit of attention. She's from Montreal, so she works in a parish, but she also runs a karate school. The bishops weren't messing with her. This is what we looked like as a total group. So this was us as delegates, voting delegates, the writing team, the facilitators, basically all of us at the synod, and you recognize the individual in the center. I had my moment. Yeah, it was pretty neat. And the best that I can describe it is you have his full attention when you're there. And you know how many people he's meeting day after day. And everybody in the room after the month had met with him. And again, we all felt the very same thing, that while we were there was no doubt that we had his undivided attention. So this was my home for the month of October. I had not lived in residence before, so it's your standard single bed. The one priest who I just shared from Malaysia, he said, Linda, you don't have a problem, but I do. Like, some of these guys were like 6 foot plus. Yeah, it was a little challenging for them. But the big thing was at least you had the windows that opened up, and I mean, we really weren't in those rooms very often. This was the group that we landed. Breakfast was like from 7 to 8 o'clock, and we were usually the first ones, so we were always there together. So at the side there on the right is the bishop from Tokyo, and just the most humble man. And again, I'll be watching on the weekend as he is made a cardinal. And who knows, I may have had breakfast with who's going to be the next pope. Who knows? But we just became wonderful friends, and we're still corresponding with many at the table. The one bishop is from Sri Lanka and Goa, India, and just wonderful, wonderful people. We would have mass at our residence with our bishops and the priests that were there, and then of course we tried to get together for lunch as Team Canada. Last year, this was my view from the terrace. I literally had the residence that was overlooking. This is the terrace that ABC and NBC basically spends about $20,000 to rent when there's a papal election, because obviously you could see the smoke from this vantage point. But that's how close we are. So just a few slides. I couldn't, not show you Rome, but this is how I spent my lunches. And people said, well, Linda, siesta means rest. And I'm going like, really? I'm in Rome in the middle of the day, I'm going to stay in my room? I don't think so. So found my gelato, found my sandwich, and just, that CBC show, Madly in Off Directions, just went in a different direction and discovered Rome. You saw the parks, you saw the streets, you saw the markets, and we really lived in Rome. We were not just visitors. It's an outdoor museum. I mean, what do you say? And I don't know whether there's more restaurants or churches in Rome, but like every block, you're going in to the next more impressive church than the last one that you had just left. It was stunning. And again, my favorite walks were along the river, and we didn't have the heat that the summer had when it was like 40 degrees. We were 23 degrees every day, most days. It was sunny. Yeah, just the beautiful streets. So, in conclusion, living through the synodal process again, we became aware that the salvation to be received and proclaimed is inherently relational. We live it and witness it together. We know that the Spirit has placed a deep and silent desire for authentic relationships and true bonds in the heart of every human being. Thank you. I think we can stop the...
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, Paul, what's happening now?
Well, we're going to stop the recording, and we're going to get into the session.
Oh, right. I'm the IT guy.
Many hats.